Hello, and welcome back to the Goal Getter Guide podcast. I am your host and guide, Jen Lafine, and today I want to take you behind the curtain of the momentum room. And if you caught last week's episode, I shared all about one of my new programs that is designed to help women entrepreneurs gain traction in their business by tackling the projects that they have been postponing. And since I introduced the Momentum Room last week, something really, really lovely has happened. People have started reaching out and they're asking me questions. They are sharing how much they recognize themselves in what I described. And more than a few of you have asked me the same thing. How did this come to be? And what made me build it? And that question deserves a real answer because I believe that we can learn so much just from studying another's journey. So that is what today is all about. Now, before I built the Momentum Room, I had been in a few accountability programs, several of them, as a matter of fact, and almost every single one of them ran on the same unspoken model. You show up and you report what you did or you didn't do, and the group witnesses it. The accountability in those programs came from not wanting to look bad and the low grade dread of admitting out loud that you hadn't followed through. And I want to be honest with you here. For some people, in some seasons, that kind of pressure works, but it didn't for me. Because I am a high achiever and I've always held myself to a high standard. And the idea of showing up to a group and admitting that I hadn't finished something, well, that was absolutely terrifying. Because this was more than just admitting that I didn't finish something that I said I was going to do. It felt like that there was evidence of something being wrong with me. So when self-doubt started to get in the way of my follow-through, and it did, because self-doubt gets in the way of everyone's follow-through, I didn't go to those groups for support. Instead, I disappeared from them. I ghosted the program entirely rather than show up and risk being embarrassed. Now, I paid for those programs, and some of them, it was quite a lot of money, and I believed in what they were offering, and I still left because the cost of staying and being seen as someone who didn't finish felt higher than the cost of the money that I would lose by quitting. And that, my friends, is what shame does. It does not push us forward, it pushes us out. Now, you may know that I was an elementary school teacher for 9 years, and the traditional model of accountability in school is pretty straightforward. I'm sure you remember. Something is either done or it isn't. You either turn it in or you don't. You pass or you fail. And that model is clean, but it is also completely disconnected from the student behind the work. And at some point in my teaching, I started doing something different. I started treating each student as an individual, not as a check mark on a list. Now, don't get me wrong, I still held high expectations for all of my students. I did not let them off the hook or lower the bar. I just reminded them of who they could be and what they could achieve. And I got curious about what was getting in the way of them finishing something instead of just documenting in my grade book that something wasn't done. I got to know my students on a personal level, and because of that, I could tell the difference between a student who was being lazy and a student who was genuinely not taking action because of self-doubt. Those are two very different situations that require two very different responses. And when I introduced that kind of accountability into my classroom, the kind that held students to high standards and treated them as whole human beings, they became way more engaged. They started performing better, not because I expected less of them, but because they stopped hiding from me, because they were constantly reminded of what they were capable of and how far they could go. And I didn't know this at the time, but that classroom was where I first developed what I now call accountability without the angst. Then at some point in my coaching work, I learned about the primal brain, how it functions, what it's designed to do, and why it becomes such a significant obstacle when we are trying to do hard things in our businesses. My friends, the primal brain is not interested in your growth goals. It is interested in keeping you safe, alive, and lazy, and that is it. And to your primal brain, hard things like bold visibility moves, difficult conversations, putting yourself out there in bigger ways, those register as threats to your primal brain, not metaphorical threats, real ones. And so it does what it's designed to do. It generates doubt, confusion, and very convincing arguments for why now is not the right time to take action. When I understood that, the whole picture shifted for me. The entrepreneurs I was working with weren't struggling because they lacked discipline or drive or desire. They were struggling because they were up against a brain that was doing exactly what it was built to do. And they were judging themselves for it, which made everything harder. Accountability suddenly meant something completely different for me. It stopped being about showing up for others or performing consistently in front of a group. It became about building the self-trust that lets you follow through, even when your primal brain is making a very loud case for staying put. That shift changed how I coached. It changed the questions I asked. It changed how I talked about follow through and avoidance and procrastination, and it changed what my clients were actually able to do. So with all of that behind me, the teaching, the coaching, the understanding of the primal brain, the years of watching smart, very, very capable entrepreneurs get stuck in the gap between knowing and doing, I had an idea. There should be a specific place for this kind of work, a room built exactly for this. And I decided that I was the one to create it. And then my primal brain got very busy. The loudest thought, and I mean, this was relentless, was people won't pay for accountability. Because let's face it, accountability, it isn't sexy. It doesn't sound like strategy. It doesn't have the shine of a new framework or a revenue breakthrough promise. It is the unsexy but essential work of actually doing the things you said you would do. And I genuinely worried that no one would see the value in it. What helped push me through that thought was the reframe that I now share with my clients all the time. Accountability, it is not a nice to have. It is business infrastructure. The same way a business needs systems and support to function, it needs structure for follow through. Without that structure, even the best strategy stays on the page. When I started thinking about the momentum room that way as infrastructure, not a luxury, I was able to move forward. I was also excited because I knew that my coaching style would be a great fit for this container. Just like with my students, I get to know my clients personally. I don't just know what their goals are, I also learn about them as people. I hear their stories, I learn their habits, and over time, I see their avoidance protocols. This is important because when we have this kind of relationship, it creates a safety where ghosting doesn't ever even get considered as an option. But I want to be honest about how I move forward because it wasn't a clean, confident launch by any stretch of the imagination. I built this program through several iterations. I tested things and I tweaked them. I combined elements and then I pulled them apart. I added things and then I took them away. I thought at one point that the momentum room should only be for entry-level entrepreneurs, people who were just getting started. And then I sat with that idea and I realized that it was completely wrong. Avoidance is not a beginner problem. The primal brain does not care how long you've been in business. Every level of entrepreneur needs this work in one way or another. So I kept going, iteration after iteration. I just kept going. And I want you to hear that I am living proof of my own methodology. I was taking action before I felt ready. I was moving through doubt instead of waiting for it to be clear. I was doing the thing that I coach my clients to do, and it was hard, and I did it anyway. The momentum room exists because I refuse to let my primal brain and self-doubt have the last word. Now, the momentum room is still evolving, and I don't think it will ever be fully finished because the women inside are evolving too, and the program grows with them. That is by intentional design. But what I want you to take away from today is this. The reason I built this the way I built it, without shame, without pressure, with high expectations and deep curiosity, goes all the way back to a classroom full of kids who performed better when someone believed in them and got curious about what was getting in their way. It goes back to every program I ghosted because the cost of being seen in my struggle felt too high. And it goes back to every entrepreneur I have ever sat with who knew exactly what they needed to do and still couldn't do it. Not because something was wrong with them, but because they were human and they were doing it alone. If any of this landed for you today, I want to hear from you. Please visit my webpage, jenlafine.com/TMR, to learn more about the Momentum Room and to schedule a conversation with me. We will talk about where you are, about what's getting in your way, and whether the Momentum Room is the right room for you right now. And if it's not, I'm going to tell you that too, and I'll point you to something that is. Thank you so much for being here again this week. I look forward to seeing you back here again next week. Have a great rest of your week.